sometimes get material which is almost impossible to make into bonsai. So this, I would say, is virtually an impossible tree to turn into a bonsai. But to my way of thinking, there is no such thing as an impossible plant or material. This is a Chinese juniper that we grew in our field and put in a pot about 10 or 12 years ago, but it was rather neglected because it was left in one corner of the nursery and nothing was ever done to it. So it's become very leggy. So I'm just wondering what we can make out of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is to take it out of this pot. As you can see, it's been growing in this pot for so long that there's a lovely little oak seedling here. Well, this would make a very nice bonsai in its own right. So we'll save this. Take this out and we will make a bonsai from this, but we will then think what we can do with this monster, which is hardly got any branches to speak of, and you must be wondering what we can do with it. All bonsai projects are a big challenge, and the only thing that occurs to me is we could either cut these two big branches off and just use this portion to make some sort of literati tree, but I would like to try and make a raft out of this tree. So this bonsai, I will try and lie it on its side and take some of these branches up and make an interesting forest out of this. So I will begin by clearing some of these dead branches because they're going to be useless. So I'll spend the next few minutes just removing these dead twigs and branches that won't come into the composition, and then I will proceed to make a raft bonsai out of this. So I won't bore you with removing all these tiny whiskery bits, but I will show you how we will tackle the other bits once I have cleared this. Now that we've cleaned up this tree, we've taken all the little bits of dead branches out, we can think of starting to style this almost impossible piece of material, and I'm going to make it into something rather unusual. Now, I showed you yesterday that there was an oak seedling here. It's got quite a thick trunk, almost as thick as the finger. This is a stray seedling which has grown over the last 5-6 years. I think the squirrels must have buried the nuts and left me with a nice little small oak tree. So we'll get this out. Going to waste it, but we'll make a nice bonsai out of that. So just trimming it, nice broom style like that, and we will have a nice little oak bonsai for free. What I'm going to do with this piece of material is to make a raft. That means I'm going to use these little side branches as individual trees, and we will make a forest instead of trying to convert this thing into a very difficult bonsai. Yeah. We've got to think ahead, and thinking ahead means that we've got to see how this composition is going to fit into the bonsai pot. But we've got to train it first so that it roots into the container. And as a temporary container, this is going to be a temporary planting container. And we will see if we can get that composition into this. So it's no good having a pot which is massive and the plant won't fit. So this is quite big. This is almost about not quite 3 feet. I would say it's about 90 centimeter or 80 centimeter, and we will get this plant into this container as a temporary container and see how we go from there. So the first thing to do is to tease the roots. Now this tray is one of these plant carrying trays, but in order to keep the soil in, I'm going to lay some mesh at the bottom. So we will cut a bit of mesh. On examining the roots, I find that this main taproot is in fact a bit of a branch that I had air layered many years ago. So this plant has been produced from air layering. Can you see it's absolutely straight? So this was a bonus. So I'll make that fit in. Right, before I lay the tree on the side, this is going to be a raft, and I want roots to come up from here. So I'm going to scrape this a little bit so that when it touches this moss and roots, will grow from here. I might even dust it with a little bit of hormone powder before I lie it in. This is hormone powder that I have, so this is going to be dusted with the powder. Partly cracking the trunk so that I can bend it. I'm now wiring these individual branches to make them into trees for the forest or the group. So this, technically speaking, is called a raft. I'm just thinking with this one, rather than make this into just one tall tree, I'm thinking of making these little branches as individual little trees in the landscape. So I'm going to lie it flat. Wired all these individual branches, as you can see, and this is the forest group. I'm going to put sphagnum moss in here because sphagnum moss is my favorite medium for generating roots. So I'm treating it like a giant air layering so that it will encourage the formation of roots much quicker than if I had just used ordinary soil. So this is sphagnum moss that we use for air layering of plants and for reviving sick trees. This moss will stay in here for at least 1 or 2 years, by which time you should get a lot of roots coming out from this lower portion, the original branch. And then I can cut off the root ball there, and this will fit into a nice bonsai tray. This is the raft that I have made. I know that I shouldn't put the moss on it just now because we're still waiting for the trees to get established, but I just put some on just to give you some impression of what it will be eventually in about 2 years' time when I take it out of this growing tray and plant it either on a piece of slate or a bonsai pot. But you get the idea of the forest. If you look from eye level, you can see the trees. With these little trees, these hopefully they will get a bit taller, and there's a contrast of different sized trees. And this root ball I hope to cut off once that has rooted. Here's a raft I made exactly 2 years ago. It's from the same sort of juniper. It's the Chinese juniper, but the variety is actually the Blow's juniper. And as you can see, this was a plant that had many branches. You can see the original trunk. If you come closer in with the camera, you can see the trunk. That is the trunk that has been laid on the side, as you can see. And the root ball was that end, and this is the apex end. And in 2 years, you can see how the roots have formed. Look at all the roots which have filled this pot. It is just crammed full of roots. So it is rooted, and I did cut off the main root ball after a year, but it has produced more roots meanwhile. I planted it in that deep plastic pot so that it would generate more roots. But the final pot could be something quite different. You could eventually put it in something like that.
Yeah.